Hello and welcome to my June TBR. It's a very optimistic one and I have a feeling I might massively fail, but there's really only one way to find out, so let's get to it. I have 8 books planned this month. One of them is a historical fiction, one of them is a sci-fi, potentially the most famous sci-fi standalone. I have 3 fantasy books, one of them is probably the most talked about book of May, and then I have 3 romances as a part of my romance reading challenge. Let's start with the historical fiction, and it's Flatlands by Sue Hubbard. This is my book club's pick for July, and it's a World War II historical fiction set in England. It's a story about Frida, who's a 12-year-old girl who has to evacuate East London to escape an expected German bombing. In her new temporary home, she's forced to live with a strange and somewhat abusive couple. There she also meets a young man, Philip, and together they explore the new area. It sounds like a somewhat poetic and philosophical book. It talks about nature and healing. I have never read anything from Sue Hubbard, so this will be my first introduction, and it's a fairly short book, so I'm excited to pick it up and see how I feel. Next up, I have one of the most popular sci-fi novels, potentially the most popular sci-fi standalone, and it's The Martian by Andy Weir. I didn't realize, but The Martian was his debut novel. He published it in 2011, and in 2015 it was made into a movie that had great success. And that same year he released a short story that is supposed to be a prequel to The Martian, and it calls Diary of an Ascan. I have seen the movie, so I know what I'm getting myself into. I really like the story. It's actually one of my favorite movies. I think it's an awesome adaptation. So it's a story of Mark Watney. He's a part of one of the first expedition on Mars. They successfully land, but then they're getting hit by a dust storm. And unfortunately his crew thinks that he's dead, so they are forced to leave Mars to save themselves. But Mark ends up being alive, so he uses everything available to him, all of the supplies and all of his knowledge and all of the technology, to try and survive and get back on Earth. I have read his other book, Project Hail Mary, earlier this year, and it's one of my favorite books, so I'm really excited to give The Martian a go and see how I like it. And moving on to romance, I have actually started a romance reading challenge with the goal of getting through my TBR and figuring out whether I like romance as a genre and what kind of romance I prefer. And there's an intro video on my channel where I go through all 26 books and talk a little bit more about how I want to approach this challenge and what I'm going to use within it. So if you're curious, I'm going to link it in the description box below and you can go watch it. And I've already selected my 3 romances that I want to read in June. 2 of them were selected from a TBR jar, 1 I chose myself, and the one that I chose myself is You and Me on Vacation by Emily Henry. And the reason why I picked this book is because Emily Henry is one of my favorite authors. I've read 3 of her romances, I have 3 left, all 3 of them are sitting on my shelf, and I thought summer is a perfect occasion where I can read 1 book per month, and then by the end of summer I will have read every single romance book Emily Henry has released. And in this one, our main characters are Alex and Poppy, and they're incredibly different, but somehow they ended up being best friends from the moment they were going to college. And every single year, Alex and Poppy, who live in 2 completely different places in America, go for a holiday for a week. And they've been doing that for the last 10 years. But 2 years ago, something happened, they had a fight, and they haven't spoken ever since. And now Poppy finds herself in a bit of a rut, and she's not very happy. And looking back at her life, she realizes that the last time she was happy was on a vacation with Alex. So she reaches out to him, offering to go on another vacation to try and restore their friendship. And to her surprise, he says yes. I'm very excited about this one. Like I said, Emily Henry is one of my favorite authors, so I can't wait to read it and see what I think. And book number 2 in my romance reading challenge is Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. And hear me out, I watched Yellowstone, I absolutely loved Yellowstone, and after I finished the series, I was craving a cowboy romance. And I've heard really good things about this series and this first book specifically, so I picked it up from the bookstore a couple of months ago, and now I'm really happy that I picked it for the first month of my reading. It's a story about Emmy, who was born in a small town, but then she moves to the big city to pursue her dream, which is riding horses, and she actually makes a career out of it, up until she gets into an accident that makes it impossible for her to sit in a saddle again, so she's forced to go back to the small town she was born in. And there she's reunited with Luke, and Luke is described as a bad boy. He owns a bar, he's a bachelor, and he just so happens to be Emmy's brother's best friend, so he's practically part of the family. And they don't really share very good childhood memories. Luke used to antagonize her as a child, but now that they've reunited, he finds himself attracted to Emmy. And it was actually her debut novel. It's a part of the series. There's 4 books in total. This one was book number 1, and the last one was released earlier this year. And they all had pretty good reviews and pretty good feedback as far as I know. So I'm excited to read this one and see how I feel. And my final romance book for June is The Deal by Al Kennedy. It's a college romance, it's a sports romance, friends to lovers, fake dating. He's a cocky captain of a hockey team. She really wants to attract his attention, so she offers to tutor him in exchange for a fake date. They end up kissing, having the best sex they've ever had, and they hit it off. It's not exactly my cup of tea, but I'm quite intrigued. I know Al Kennedy's books are very popular as far as romance goes, so I'm open to giving it a go. Worst case, if I don't like it, I can always DNF it. And now onto the fantasy, and I'm very excited for all three books that I have selected. One of them is a continuation of the series that I started in May. One of them is one of the most anticipated releases of the summer, and one of them is one of the most talked about books this May. And to start off with, I have A Haunt for Jackals by J.L. Odom, and it's a book 2 in her Land of Exile series. It's supposed to be a 3-book series. The last book is coming out in 2026, and her first book, By Blood by Salt, was my book club selection for May, and I really enjoyed the book. It's an SPFBO 2024 winner. I thought it was a great book. It ends on a bit of a, maybe not a cliffhanger, but there's a clear continuation to the story, so I really couldn't wait to pick up the second one. And the next one is potentially the most anticipated fantasy release of the summer, and I don't own the book yet. I'm going to pop it on the screen. It comes out on 10th of June, and it's Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. And in this book, we have 3 different timelines. We have vampires, we have horror, we have dark paranormal fantasy, and that's kind of all I know. You can't really gather too much from the synopsis, and I wasn't really trying to find too much information. I like the idea of going in blind. I've actually never read anything from V.E. Schwab, but I've only ever heard really good things about her books. I'm going to receive my copy on 24th of June because I'm going to an event with her in London, and that's where I'm going to receive my copy, and then I'm very excited to read it and see how I like it. And the last but hopefully not least, though, if I'm being honest, my expectations are pretty low, is one of the most hyped up books of May, and it's Silver Lead by Dani Francis. Now, the reason why the book is so hyped up is because Dani Francis is actually a pen name, and the publisher has revealed that it's actually a New York Times best-selling author, and the author is Canadian, and that's all the information that the internet knows, and the internet is going crazy trying to figure out who Dani Francis is. And the thing is, that's about all I know about the book. I haven't really heard anybody talk about the plot or give actual reviews or say how they feel about the book. At least I haven't stumbled upon those videos. Everybody is just trying to figure out who Dani Francis is, and there's a bunch of theories of how Dani Francis is probably somebody incredibly problematic and how people shouldn't pick up this book because if they are somebody problematic, then they are supporting a problematic author, which nobody really wants to do that. And from what I have gathered, it's a romance fantasy. It's actually a dystopian romance fantasy, which I quite like, and our main character is a modified, or otherwise called mod, and being a mod gets you killed in this world. But she gets drafted into this elite training force called Silver Block, hence the name. So I haven't really gone out of my way trying to find how people are rating this book and what people are saying about this book and whether they like it or not. Like I said, I only stumbled upon videos talking about Dani Francis and trying to figure out who Dani Francis is. So I'm kind of going in blind, and I much prefer that. So I'll see if I like the book or if it's actually just overhyped. So that's my list, that's my 8 books, and 8 books is a pretty optimistic list for me as is, but there's also a possibility of me moving in June, so if that's the case, then I highly doubt I will be able to read all of them, but who knows, only time will tell, right? So thank you very much for watching this video. If you have read any of these books, please leave a comment down below. I would absolutely love to chat about them, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!